Today we are going to talk about sensation. The objective of this module is to understand the sensation and the sensory organs, its effect on the behavior. Now we are accustomed to thinking of the senses as being quite different from one another. However, all our senses involve some common processes. All sensation is a result of the stimulation of a specialized cell called sensory receptors by some form of energy. Imagine biting into an apple. Your experiences of hearing the apple crunch is a response to the physical energy of vibrations in the air or sound waves. The sweet taste of the apple is a response to the physical energy of dissolvable chemicals into your mouth, just as the distinctive sharp aroma of the apple is a response to airborne chemical molecules that you inhale through your nose. The smooth feel of the apple's skin is a response to the pressure of the apple against your hand. And the bright color of the apple is response to the physical energy of light waves reflecting from the irregularly shaped object into which you have just bitten. Sensory receptors convert these different forms of physical energy into electrical impulses that are transmitted via neurons to the brain. The process by which a form of physical energy is converted into a coded neural signal that can be processed by the nervous system is called as transduction. These neural signals are sent to the brain where the perceptual processes of organizing and interpreting the coded messages occur. We are constantly being bombarded by many different forms of energy. For instance, at this very moment, television waves are bouncing around the atmosphere and passing through your body. However, sensory receptors are so highly specialized that they are sensitive only to very specific types of energy. So, for any type of stimulation to be sensed, the stimulus energy must first be in the form that can be detected by our sensory receptor cells. Otherwise, transduction cannot occur. Sensory threshold, along with being specialized as to the types of energy that can be detected, our senses are specialized in other ways as well. We do not have an infinite capacity to detect all levels of energy. To be sensed, a stimulus must first be strong enough to be detected, such as there should be loud enough to be heard, concentrated enough to be smelled, bright enough to be seen. The point at which a stimulus is strong enough to be detected because it activates a sensory receptor cell is called a threshold. There are two general kinds of sensory thresholds for each senses: the absolute threshold and the difference threshold. The absolute threshold refers to the smallest possible strength of a stimulus that can be detected half the time. Now, we may question, why just half the time? It turns out that the minimum level of stimulation that can be detected varies from person to person and from trial to trial. Because of this human variability, researchers have arbitrarily set the limit as the minimum level of stimulation that can be detected half the time. Under ideal condition, which rarely occurs in normal daily life, our sensory abilities are far more sensitive than you might think. The other important threshold involves detecting the difference between two stimuli. The difference threshold is the smallest possible difference between two stimuli that can be detected half the time. Another term for this difference threshold is just noticeable difference, which is abbreviated as JND. The just noticeable difference will vary depending on its relation to the original stimulus. This principle of sensation is called Weber's law, after the German physiologist Ernst Weber. Weber's law holds that for each sense, the size of a just noticeable difference is a constant proportion of the size of the initial stimulus. So, whether we can detect a change in the strength of a stimulus depends on the intensity of the original stimulus. Characteristics of sensation. There are certain general distinguishable characters of sensation such as quality, intensity, duration or potensity, extensity or volume, and local characters or local signs. Discussed. Quality refers to sensation differing in quality. Sensation of colors, sounds, taste, smell, heat and cold differ from one another in quality. There is a generic difference among them. They are sensations of different kinds. They have different sense organs. They are produced by different kinds of stimuli. Sensation of colors are produced by the action of light waves on the retina of eyeball. Sensation of sounds are produced by the action of air waves on the auditory organs. Colors like red, green, blue, yellow, etc. differ from one another within the same genus of color. There is a specific difference among them. Red differs from blue specifically and from heat and cold generically. In the generic difference of sensation, there are different kinds of sense organs and different kind of sensory of different nerves. Intensity. Sensation of the same quality may differ in intensity. A light may be dim or bright, a sound faint or loud, a smell mild or strong, a taste weak or strong, a pressure light or heavy. A dim light produces a faint sensation of light. A bright light produces an intense sensation of light. All sensations differ in intensity, light, sounds, tastes, smells, temperature, pains, pressure, hunger, thirst, fatigue, and etc. All vary from very weak to very intense. The other conditions remaining the same, greater intensities of stimuli produces greater intensities of sensation. Duration of potensity. Every sensation has a sensible duration. A sensation may linger in a mind for a certain duration. A sound sensation may last for a shorter or longer duration. The sound which lasts 5 seconds feels differently when it ceases from a sound which lasts 20 seconds. This is a difference in duration. Duration is also called potensity or potensive magnitude. Sensations alike in quality and intensity may differ in duration. Extensity. Visual and tactual sensation have extensity. Look at the moon and then at the star. You have two visual sensations. The first visual sensation has greater extensity than the second one. Touch a book with a fingertip and then with your palm. You have two tactile sensations. The first tactile sensation has greater extensity than the second one. Extensity is the attribute of a sensation which is due to the area of sensitive surface which is stimulated by a stimulus. Extensity is also called extensiveness, voluminousness, diffusion or spread outness. Local sign. If a person touches your cheek, forehead and nose successively with the same pencil point with the same degree of pressure, your tactual sensation will differ from one another in local signs. They will not differ in quality or intensity. Local sign is a peculiar attribute which distinguishes a sensation of one part of an extended sense organ. Types of sensation. Vision. Vision is the most studied of all the senses. One thing vision researchers have known for a long time is that there is a great deal more information in the sensory environment than our eyes can take in. Eyes can respond only to a band of light waves called the visual spectrum. These waves are measured in wavelengths, the distance from the peak of one wave to the peak of the next. The shortest light waves we can see appear violet, while the longest visible waves appears red. However, sight is much more than just responses to light. Sight involves specialized structure in the eye and specific parts of the brain that receives and processes neural impulses from the eye. The ability to sense color, and they are also important parts of sight. The globe-shaped human eyeball, as shown in the figure, measures about 1 inch in diameter. Curving outward from the eye's surface is the cornea, the tough, transparent protective layer covering the front of the eye. The cornea performs the first step in vision by bending the light rays inwards. It directs the light rays through the pupil, the small dark opening in the center of the iris or colored part of the iris. The iris dilates and contracts the pupil to regulate the amount of light entering the eye. Suspended just behind the iris and the pupil, the lens is composed of many thin layers and looks like a transparent disc. The lens performs the task of focusing on viewed objects. It flattens as it focuses on objects at a distance and becomes more spherical bulging in the center as it focuses on close objects. This flattening and bulging action of the lens is known as accommodation. With age, the lens loses the ability to change its shape to accommodate for near vision, a condition called as presbyopia or also called as old eyes. This is why many people over the age of 40 must hold a book or newspaper at arm's length or use reading glasses to magnify the print. The lens focuses the incoming image onto the retina, a layer of tissues about the size of a small postage stamp and as thin as onion skin, located on the inner surface of the eyeball and containing the sensory receptors for vision. The image that is projected onto the retina is upside down and reversed from left to right as shown in the figure. In some people, the distance through the eyeball, that is from the lens to the retina, is either too short or too long for proper focusing. Nearsightedness or myopia occurs when the lens focuses images of distant objects in front of rather than on the retina. A person with this condition will be able to see near objects clearly, but distant images will be blurred. Farsightedness, hyperopia, occurs when the lens focuses images of close objects behind rather than on the retina. The individual is able to see far objects clearly, but close objects are blurred. Both conditions are correctable with eyeglasses or contact lenses or by surgical procedures. At the back of the retina is a layer of light sensitive receptor cells called as the rods and the cones. Named for their shapes, the rods look like slender cylinders and the cones appear shorter and more rounded. There are about 120 million rods and 6 million cones in each retina. The cones are the receptor cells that enable us to see color and fine details in adequate light, but they do not function in very dim light. By contrast, the rods in the human eyes are extremely sensitive, allowing the eye to respond to as few as 5 photons of light. A substance called as rhodopsin present in the rods enables us to adapt to variations in light. Rhodopsin has two components, opsin and retinal, a chemical similar to vitamin A. In bright light, opsin and retinal breaks apart as the process of light adaptation takes place. During dark adaptation, opsin and retinal bond to one another, reforming rhodopsin. At the center of the retina is the fovea, a small area about the size of a period at the end of this sentence. When you look directly at an object, the image of the object is focused on the center of your fovea. The fovea contains no rods but has about 30,000 cones tightly packed together, providing the clearest and sharpest area of vision in the whole retina. The cones are most densely packed at the center of the fovea. Their density decreases sharply just a few degrees beyond the fovea's center and then levels off more gradually to the periphery of the retina. Vision and the brain. As we can see from the image, the brain is responsible for converting the upside down retinal images into meaningful visual information. But the first stage of neural processing actually takes place in the retina itself. Before light rays reach the sensory receptors on the rods and cones, they pass through 4 layers of tissues, each of which contains specialized neurons, ganglion cell, amacrine cells, bipolar cells and horizontal cells. When the light rays reach the sensory receptors, that is the rods and the cones, the receptors transduce or change them to neural impulses. The impulses are then transmitted to the bipolar, amacrine and horizontal cells, which carry them to the ganglion cells. The approximately 1 million axon-like extensions of the ganglion cells are bundled together in a pencil-sized cable that extends through the wall of the retina, leaving the eye and leading to the brain. There are no rods or cones where the cable runs through the retinal wall. So this point is a blind spot in each eye. Beyond the retinal wall of each eye, the cable becomes the optic nerve, the nerve that carries visual information from the retina to the brain. The 2 optic nerves come together at the optic chiasm, a point where some of their nerve fibers cross to the opposite side of the brain. The nerve fibers from the right half of each retina go to the right hemisphere, and those from the left half of each retina go to the left hemisphere. This crossing over is important because it allows visual information from a single eye to be represented in the primary visual cortex of both hemispheres of the brain. Hearing and balance. In this section, we will discuss the properties of sound, the different structures that make up the ear, and how they function and affect our balance and movement. Sound. Sound requires a medium such as air, water, or a solid object through which to move. This fact was demonstrated by Robert Boyle when he suspended a ringing pocket watch by a thread inside a specially designed jar. When Boyle pumped all the air out of the jar, he could no longer hear the watch ring. But when he pumped the air back into the jar, he could again hear the watch ringing. What gives sound its unique qualities? The answer is its frequency, amplitude, and timbre, or the physical characteristics of the sound. Frequency is determined by the number of cycles completed by a sound wave in 1 second. The unit used to measure a wave's frequency or cycle per second is known as hertz. The pitch, how high or low the sound is chiefly determined by frequency. The higher the frequency, the more cycles per second, the higher the sound. The human ear can hear sound frequencies from low bass tones of around 20 Hz up to high pitched sounds of about 20,000 Hz. However, adults' ability to hear such high frequency varies a lot from one individual to another. The loudness of a sound is determined by a measure called amplitude. The force or pressure with which air molecules move chiefly determines loudness, which is measured using a unit called the bell, named for Alexander Graham Bell. Because the bell is rather large unit, sound levels are expressed in tenth of a bell or decibels. The threshold of human hearing is set at 0 decibel, which does not mean the absence of sound, but rather the softest sound that can be heard in a very quiet setting. Each increases of 10 decibels make a sound 10 times louder. Another characteristic of sound is timbre, the distinctive quality of a sound that distinguishes it from other sounds of the same pitch and loudness. Human voices vary in timbre as well, providing us with a way of recognizing individuals when we cannot see their faces. Timbres vary from one instrument to another and from one voice to another, because most sounds consist of several different frequencies rather than a single pitch. The range of those frequencies gives each musical instrument and each human voice its unique sound. Audition is the sensation and process of hearing. The oddly shaped curved flap of cartilage and skin called the pinna is the visible part of the outer ear, as shown in the figure. Inside the ear, the auditory canal is about 1 inch long and its entrance is lined with hairs. At the end of the auditory canal is the eardrum or tympanic membrane, a thin flexible membrane about 1/3 inch in diameter. The eardrum moves in response to the sound waves that travel through the auditory canal and strike it. The middle ear is no longer than an aspirin tablet. Inside its chamber are the ossicles, the 3 smallest bones in the human body. Named for their shapes, the ossicles, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup are connected in order, linking the eardrum to the oval window. When vibrations of the stirrup causes it to push against the oval window, the vibrations are transmitted to the inner ear, which begins at the inner side of the oval window at the cochlea, a fluid-filled snail-shaped bony chamber. Vibrations move the fluid in the cochlea back and forth in the waves. Inside the cochlea, attached to its thinner basilar membrane, are about 15,000 sensory receptors called hair cells, each with a bundle of tiny hair protruding from it. The tiny hair bundles are pushed and pulled by the motion of the fluid inside the cochlea. If the tip of a hair bundle is moved only as much as the width of an atom, an electrical impulse is generated, which is transmitted to the brain by the way of the auditory nerve. We can hear some sounds through bone conduction. The vibration of the bones in the face and the skull. When you click your teeth or eat crunchy food, you hear these sounds mainly through bone conduction. Balance and movement. No one doubts the importance of the ear and the auditory information they provide to the brain in everyday life. But did you know that structures in the ears also play an important role in your ability to move and to maintain your balance? The kinesthetic sense provides information about the position of the body parts in relation to each other and the movement of the entire body or its parts. The information is detected by receptors in the joints, ligaments and muscles. The other senses provides additional information about body positions and movements. The kinesthetic senses functions poorly when the brain is deprived of visual information. Still, it does function fairly well even without visual inputs. The visual and the kinesthetic system work with the vestibular senses to enable us to execute smooth, coordinated movements. The vestibular senses detects movements and provides information about the body's orientation in space. The vestibular sense organs are located in the semicircular canals and the vestibular sacs in the inner ear. The semicircular canal senses the rotation of your head, such as when you are turning your head from side to side or when you are spinning around. Because the canals are filled with fluid, rotating movement of the head in any direction sends the fluid coursing through the tube like semicircular canals. In the canals, the moving fluid bends the hair cells, which act as receptors and sends neural impulses to the brain. Because there are 3 canals, each positioned on a different plane, rotation in a given direction will cause the hair cells in one canal to bend more than the hair cells in the other canals. The semicircular canals and the vestibular sacs signals only changes in motion or orientation. If you are blindfolded and had no visual or other external cues, you would not be able to sense motion once your speed reached a constant rate. So, to summarize module number 14, sensation, we have understood or defined what is sensation. We have seen how characteristics of sensory processes affect our perception of the world and how eye and ear affects our understanding, perception and visualization of the world through biological processes.